This week on the High Ground podcast, we break down my personal favorite Star Wars film in the whole saga, The Empire Strikes Back. So excited to get into it. Let's go! Hello, welcome, and thank everyone for coming here to the High Ground podcast. I'm really excited because we're talking Empire Strikes Back, and that's my favorite Star Wars movie, so I am stoked on it. Um,
Mine as well.
and yes, it's
Same.
Pep's favorite as well. Okay,
Me too.
awesome. Okay, so I got the right crowd.
Yeah.
Um, and Victoria and Pep have come on to the show before. I'm super excited to have you on, Matt, because I love how the detail that you go into on your TikToks, and it's awesome. So I'm stoked to have you here. But
Appreciate
um,
it.
speaking of which, we'll just go around. I know some of you have already shared it, but just a little brief introduction. If this could be someone's first time watching a podcast, so I will start with Victoria. Who are you? How'd you get started with Star Wars? And who's your favorite original trilogy character?
I bet you can't guess.
Yeah.
But no, I'm Victoria. It's Victoria y'all on TikTok, nowhere else right now. But I guess starting with Star Wars, it was kind of like a heritage. So it gets passed down through my family. So it became sort of like a family affair, something that we would all connect over. We went to Star Wars weekend at Disney, and those were fun. But I don't know. I guess I just really used it as a way to connect with others, and that's very impactful to the way I view Star Wars now. It's a connective and collaborative act. Yes, you can make it super personal and watch it by yourself and enjoy it in your own personal self, but it is a way to connect with others, like this podcast. But my favorite original trilogy character is Darth Vader. And I guess that came out of I always felt a little like insecure, a little introverted, and it was really hard for me to stand up for myself. And so I saw Darth Vader as this like, wow, this powerful figure on screen. He is one of the most powerful figures we see on screen, period. And kind of seeing how the height of his power, I know this is corny, but how the height of his power and his motivation was an expression of very deep love. And it made me feel like there's some sort of power within me because I can love well. And so I don't know. I just really that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the power of love is what conquered the Star Wars universe
Yep.
over and over. It's also what nearly destroyed it. But we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
Pep, you?
Well, I'm _Element7 _Element7 on YouTube, Element X Style on Instagram, which I have now started posting reels alongside my TikToks. So go follow me there if you want to. I'm a Star Wars creator. And I got into Star Wars probably just like everyone else did. My brother showed me A New Hope on VHS when I was a wee bit lad. And I was always very imaginative, but it seemed like Star Wars had propelled my imagination like 100-fold since learning about the Force, seeing a laser sword, and just kind of like being the first introduction to something that I was so gung-ho about in terms of exploring the deeper lore of it. Because I was really young still when I first watched it, and so I hadn't really dove deep into any kind of subject matter in terms of lore before. So when the Force was a subject, when laser swords were a thing, I was like, this is something that really, really interests me. And then I just went all in with Star Wars after that. My favorite OT character, it's a toss-up between Luke and Yoda, primarily because I didn't start liking Luke until Empire, and we don't meet Yoda until Empire. So I guess if I had to pick one, I'd have to pick Yoda, only because like the effect that Yoda has on me to this day is a testament to how great he was as a sage,
Mhm.
and his impact on the story and Luke's training, given the amount of time he's involved in the OT. Um, so personally, Yoda had the most impact on me personally in the OT, and that's why he's my favorite.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. And last but certainly not least, Matt.
How's it going? So this is definitely weird and new to me, but my name is Matthew Tracy, Matty _T Swizzle on TikTok. No relation to Taylor Swift. It's all ironic. But yeah, you can find me over there. Still relatively new. You guys, actually the three of you guys were some of the people that inspired me to start making Star Wars content on TikTok. So this is really weird to be on here with you guys. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, gone to Star Wars. I remember when I was growing up, I was probably 5 or 6, and my dad had this case. I didn't realize at the time, but it was a Darth Vader case. It had some of his really, really old Star Wars figures, and it was under his bed. And I would love to go up there and like pull them out and look at them. I had no idea what it was. And then right around the time I think Revenge of the Sith was about to come out, he sat me down and he was like, all right, it's time to have the talk about Star Wars. And so he sat me down and we watched through the original trilogy and then got caught up to Revenge of the Sith. And I was blown away. I mean, I was like, it's pretty cool. This is better than what I've been watching. So as far as favorite original trilogy characters go, probably Wedge. I'm the guy that likes to look in the background, and I remembered Wedge from the first one, and we were watching Empire, and I was like, wait, that's the guy from the first movie. That's pretty cool. He's making a reappearance. He's not like a big player. And then we got to Return of the Jedi and he was in it again. And I was like, dang, this guy's like really cool. He kind of doesn't get a lot of spotlight, but I can appreciate that. And then I started reading all the books and he became quickly one of my favorites of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
So,
Have you read the Aftermath trilogy?
I have, yeah.
Okay, just because I don't know, they always he always has weird love interest in both canon and legends where things don't go the way he plans, but I'm happy that he ended up doing well. Yeah, and then as you guys know, Empire is my number one. I've watched it a million times. I've watched the tape until I broke it, and yeah, I've just always been a huge fan. But I love how you put it, Element, because it really is, I have a big interest in writing and things like that, and I feel like Star Wars is a big part of learning about the concept of having this new world that's different from ours that we live in. During this is what helped fuel my creativity and life in general. You know what I mean? Helps you gain different perspective on things. And so yeah, just always been a huge fan. For me, as far as favorite original trilogy character, I gotta go with my boy Luke. Um, just love him, especially in this movie because this is where all the depth came. A New Hope was very event based, but this one is very character driven, and that's my jam. That's the sauce. Um, but so for me, and that's what makes Empire special. But I want to jump to Element. What makes Empire special, and where does it rank? Well, I know where it ranks, but yeah.
Empire ranks number one, obviously, on top of The Last Jedi, and me, like my two top movies of Star Wars has heavily to do with deep lore. And what makes Empire so special is that, as I mentioned, like in A New Hope, when I was introduced to the Force and laser swords and this kind of inkling of an idea of like world building, Empire scaled up that galaxy 100-fold, because in A New Hope we had only had Tatooine and like Alderaan got blown up, and then like the Death Star. In Empire, I mean, we heard about Ord Mantell, we were on Hoth, we were seeing tauntauns and like snow creatures and all kinds of like different like fauna and creatures on Dagobah. And then like we had only gotten like a sprinkling of Obi-Wan saying use the Force in A New Hope, and in Empire he showed up as a full-fledged Force ghost. That was our first like vision of a Force ghost. And so in that way, when he starts training on Dagobah and he meets Master Yoda, it's just like as I said, it's scaled up the world building in the universe 100-fold, and that's what makes it special for me.
Yeah, totally. And Matt?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with that. Just how much it added to the universe, because episode 4 was pretty self-contained, and then this really just spread it out. But I also really like just the atmosphere that the movie creates. The beginning has the suspense, the end has kind of the fun, and then with the cliffhanger and everything. I just like from start to finish with the music and the visuals and everything, just the atmosphere that the entire movie gives off. It's still one of the reasons it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I like how you say atmosphere, because the movie just like, it feels like, I mean, it hits different, it just,
yeah.
And Victoria, how about you?
So I was reading the other day, and it was like talking about how initially, before Empire Strikes Back was released, it was, like a second one can only be a second one, but Empire Strikes Back was so much more. It's this legendary sequel. And, as Element said, and as Obi-Wan would say, it's the first step into a larger world. It expands the Star Wars universe in so many ways. And it's something I personally love about Empire Strikes Back, you had already mentioned. It calls for an active audience, not a latent audience. This is not just entertainment anymore, it's a world. And so, it requires work on our part to sift through the complexity, the darkness. Like, it's a dark film. And we get to know characters in really meaningful ways. We'll discuss all of this later, but, like from the duel on Bespin, you get an entire layer of identity, not only to our hero, but to our antagonist. And, like we see Darth Vader kneel, that he's an apprentice all of a sudden. And you see his like power, and then all of a sudden, getting out of the asteroid field so that he can kneel in front of someone. So like it, reveals the larger complexity of the Sith. We see Yoda, it's a larger complexity to the Jedi. And I don't know, there's just something that stirs something within us. And I was reading again, it said that Empire Strikes Back was always referred to as the heart of Star Wars. That really struck me because, being an emotionally driven person, and as we've talked about already, emotions were important to this. A lot of the action is, yes, we get things like Hoth, the duel on Bespin, we get the asteroid field, but we have emotional action more than anything, and like identity action. So I think that's what makes Empire so special. And even from the opening crawl, we get, it is a dark time for the rebellion. Like already you're like, whoop, and it says, although, like the word although is like, I'm going to challenge everything you thought you knew about Star Wars. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, just like I said, I mean, that the first movie is a it's a family oriented, but it's a kid's power fantasy with very clear motifs of right and wrong. And then this one, all of that gets turned for each and every single character in the whole entire film. And so that's what we're gonna jump into. All right, so it goes straight into Act 1. I'm just calling it, from the opening crawl until Luke, heads to the Dagobah system. A lot to digest. There's a lot of parts and players. If you can pick one or two, I'm gonna start with Matt on this one.
Okay, so there's always those one or two moments in a film that just like stick. Like the first time you watched it, you still remember just sitting there and staring at it. And I don't know why, but I remember sitting on that couch and watching the through the macro binoculars, seeing those walkers walk across that ridge, and I was just sitting there, and like I think the music kind of like dulls down, and it's just like that suspense that it builds. And I just never seen anything like that, and I still remember just sitting there and like, what's gonna happen? And then just everything that follows. Sometimes you build up those expectations, but that really fulfilled on those expectations that it builds up. So just feeling that dread of like, oh boy, we're not just gonna win this one, are we? I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah,
and then I also,
because it's unique to have that big action set piece right off the bat in a movie, and like you would never really see that. But go on.
I was gonna say the other thing that stuck with me was the doggone wampas. Man, that thing scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. He chopped his arm off, and I was like, "Oh, it's blood and gore. What am I watching?" But that really scared me and scarred me as a child. Wampas.
Not gonna lie, whenever my family would go up to the snow from Northern California, we'd go up to like Fort Bragg and stuff. I was always afraid to go out alone because there was
Wampas
always
will get
one
ya.
just just off site, you know.
Yeah. You never know when a Wampa will strike.
And but Victoria, Act One, what jumps out at
Oh
you?
man, you know I could talk forever. So I did narrow it down, but it's the first time we hear the Imperial March, and
Mhm.
it just swells within you. And we're left with the Empire being very vulnerable at the end of A New Hope. You know, we get this victorious, like, woohoo, the rebellion won, but they didn't. You know, and so you see this kind of contrast and this juxtaposition from like Darth Vader is so vulnerable at the end of A New Hope, and then he's standing in front on the command bridge, and you just see his silhouette, which was recalled in The Last Jedi with Leia, which I thought was a really cool parallel. But you just see his like silhouette over the large window, and it pans out. You're hearing this like really powerful Imperial March. We're introduced to Piet, and I love Piet. Y'all
I knew
know
you were
how I
gonna
feel
say it.
about him. And you know, Piet adds this layer to the Empire. You know, we almost sympathize for him. Like his boss, don't get me started on Ozzel. I swore I would not start on Ozzel, but his boss is not listening to him, and you know he's working hard, and so you see this new layer to the Empire that is like these people are doing their jobs. You know, like he's working for a wife and kids at home, and so I don't know. It adds, like you said, this layer that of ambiguity to what we think we know, and so I think you know I said I wouldn't get started on Ozzel, but you know Ozzel
You're a
mansplains to
little.
Darth Vader. And it's like, how on earth can you mansplain to Darth Vader? He's like, my lord, there are so many uncharted settlements. It's like, come on. He knows what he's talking about, you know? So, oh well. But I guess this happens before Dagobah too. The Zoom call, where, I mean, Darth Vader is like sitting, this one, the Zoom call with Ozzel, and you see like the power, the like suspense. Ozzel's getting demoted, Piet's getting his promotion, and then the guy in the back.
Demoted.
I love the guy in the back. He's sitting at his computer and he's like trying to look busy. He's like trying to look busy the whole time. I don't know. It's just there's like interesting humor in Empire Strikes Back that's like, I don't know. I just found to be very fun. But I think we see, I don't know, we just see a new, you know, layer to the Empire in this. We see Darth Vader in his like power. He's at the peak, and he's grown from that vulnerability at the end of A New Hope. And I don't know, you see the scope of the Empire, and I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah, I love it too. I got Brooke in the chat saying the Wampa deserved better.
Hashtag.
And
Oh, Darth Wampa.
it just makes me think of a deleted scene where there's like a room inside of Echo Base where you open it and there's Wampas in there, and so like they lock it and put up a sign, and then when the Empire invades, they take off the sign, and like it's just a weird, like weird humorous bit that kind of doesn't quite fit in, but I don't know, it just makes me chuckle whenever I think about it. Element, what do you got?
So as I said earlier, like the biggest part of this movie is about, you know, the world building and expanding on the universe. So a couple things come out to me in Act One is, of course, seeing the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan. When I first saw that, I was like, is he back? But then, you know, because I was like young when I first saw it, but obviously it has a lot of implications on the Force and the larger scope of that lore. And Luke obviously doing the Force pull, that was another new thing from the Force that we hadn't seen from A New Hope. So beyond deflecting laser blasts and pulling off 1 in a million shots, this was like our full-fledged display of how one could use the Force like in practical settings. And so that scene, I'm pretty sure this is the same for everyone in the chat and everyone here. That scene, you paused right away and you tried to do that to your remote control, and you were like, "No, it's not working." The other parts in Act 1, definitely, we get a lot of Han and Leia banter during this time as well. It's so much sexual tension. We get the stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking Nerf herder quote. The infamous incestuous kiss, and we get to see Leia be a general. Like, the first time we see her, she's rescuing herself. She's taking the reins from Han and Luke. And the second time we see her in here, she's an actual general. She's like standing amongst her troops. She's disseminating tactical information. She's giving orders. She's like, and everyone's looking at her with the utmost respect. And that scene is an incredible scene to see, especially if you look up to Leia. And yeah, don't want to go ahead into Act 2.
No, but you're absolutely right. When she got introduced to us as a far-off damsel in distress, who quickly started taking over the situation once they freed her. But in this film, she's evacuating this entire base and had made no thought or any plans for her own escape. Like, they had to physically pull her off, because that was just the last thing on her mind. And I really enjoy that as well. And then for me, writing on that is the interaction between her and Han, where he's trying to get her to say it. He knows that there's something there, and he's like, just say it. And later we get the continuation of that conversation. But yeah, I mean, Han just being just the manliest man in the galaxy, just doing his thing. And also, like you were saying, Matt, just the scope of it, the scope of the Empire. Seeing all this new stuff, seeing the snow speeders for the first time, you're like, what is this? And also it makes me laugh every time when he hops in and Dak's like, I feel like I could take on the whole Empire myself. Dies immediately. And, it just makes me laugh. Insult and injury, yeah. But yeah, all right. So jumping forward, because this is my favorite part, is this middle little chunk here. We get to Act 2, so we got, Luke takes off, heads to the Dagobah system, and Han and Leia are on the Falcon going to the getting chased down by the Empire, and it's just wonderful. I started with Matt last time, so Victoria.
Yeah, there's so much to say, and so I feel like, but I will. So, starting on Dagobah, R2 playing in the swamp is the cutest thing ever, and it's just really, it's adorable. Just the little scopy, yeah, it's just adorable. Then I took some notes so that I would remember, because I'm bad at like organizing, but so as far as time goes, meditation chamber, Piet walks in. We see evidence of Darth Vader's humanity. So I think that's a really interesting moment. Like, we see like a human head, and you're like, wait a second, things I thought I knew. And then the way that James Earl Jones says, asteroids do not concern me, Admiral. I just love it. Iconic. It's my bio on TikTok. Empire Strikes Back Yoda energy, immaculate. He's just so funny. It's a good, lighthearted lift from like the suspense of the like chase with Han and Leia, and the suspense of Hoth. Like, Hoth is dense, and we love it, but it's a lot. And so like, Yoda's really cool, and we introduce him as like almost in a little humorous way, but then we get to see him grow like really beautifully. Looking for a great warrior, wars do not make one great. Like, we see this sort of sage begin to come out, like you're saying, Element, and it's you see so many layers begin to open and so many doors. But when he starts eating Luke's dinner, I lose it every time. I can't. The light, the mud hole, slimy, my home this is, it just kills me. And R2 and Yoda's duel. I know we're about to talk about the duel on Bespin, but the most iconic is R2 and Yoda's duel. I'm telling you, it's just so funny. And if you guys, yeah, and if you guys have ever seen the bad lip reading where it's like the song about the seagulls, oh, it kills me. It kills me. The when Palpy contacts Vader for the first time in this act, and so this is like opening up a whole new can of worms. You know, we see him kneel and we're like, this guy's so powerful. He's kneeling to somebody. He's subservient to someone. This guy must be like, you know, and so it's just like very like it makes your heart race. But with the knowledge that we have now, when they're like, oh, this must be the offspring of Anakin Skywalker, and Vader's like, how is that possible? You know, very salty. Then I don't know, there's just a lot of layers to that conversation. It opens up a whole lot. And then also in this act is Yoda and his theme for the first time. Like I'm telling you, it's like the end of It's a Wonderful Life when Rocky runs up the stairs and Yoda lifting Luke's ship out of the swamp.
Yeah.
Those have the same triumphant energy. Cry every time. The Minox scared me as a kid.
Oh, when it jumps on the window? Yeah.
Yes. It kills me. We hear about the dark side for the first time. We hear about, you know, well, not the first time, but like we hear a bit more openness about it. Like Yoda speaks about its consumption. About how you're almost a victim to the dark side in a way. Like it reminds me of like the Momin thing. The dark side does not serve you; you serve the dark side. Or like if you do not feed the dark side, the dark side will feed on you. And so it's just a very interesting, like chilling view of the dark side. And so I don't know, it's just really beautiful. And I'm sure Element will elaborate more.
It's not me.
Hey, it's all good. Like I can hear you talk about it all day, and the chat is just absolutely loves you, Victoria. So
I love you guys. But I don't know. It's just it's so beautiful. Like this act in particular is just like you were saying, it's the favorite act almost. Like it's so much information. It's just really interesting. Like we are introduced to Boba Fett in this. We're like bounty hunters, we don't need our scum, and we see Piet almost like get defensive, like I'm not doing my job well enough, and then we see him rushedly say, "Oh, my lord, we have them," and then rip Captain Nita. I love him. And then when Luke says, yeah, and then when I don't believe it, that's why you fail. Oh, that's really beautiful. And then Leia and Han arrive on Bespin. You're really unsure about Lando. You're almost kind of like on edge, and you feel this anticipation start to build. And so you had this like action at Hoth, and then we're like open, and it's like a nice. I'm not a music person, but it's like a little symphony, and you're like really getting this anticipatory build for the next act, and that's where I'll end.
All right, I appreciate it. And Element, your thoughts?
So definitely my favorite act of Empire Strikes Back, and possibly like the only moment that really of course there's a lot of moments, but the only moment that I'm going to mention as a standout is just Luke's entire time on Dagobah, training with Luke, because up until this point in the movie, we've only scratched the surface of what the Force was. We had the light side, we had the dark side, and in this act that we see our first clear distinction in terms of the Force, like, because before then the only line that was drawn was the man in black killed Luke's father, who was the man in white, so to speak. But it's also the first time we get to see Luke dip into the dark side with what he takes with him and takes out of the cave, his propensity to be impatient, and act on emotions. Um, just the entire time Yoda is teaching Luke, he's going from like this senile old sage to this wondrous being, like Victoria said, in like a matter of like an hour, I believe. And each step of the way, everything he's teaching Luke about the Force is just getting bigger and bigger in scope, and you're learning more and more distinction, or I guess you're, as with Star Wars, you're peeling away more and more layers and revealing a lot more ambiguity toward with a lot of things in the Force. But I think within that moment, some moments that stand out to me obviously is when Yoda makes that clear distinction, like, how do I know the good from the bad? And he says, when you are calm, at peace, and passive, and the dark side is easy, more seductive. And he says, like, he tries to make that point to Luke. He says, not more powerful, just easier. And a lot of people, especially people who are, I guess, stands of Sith or the dark side, try to latch on to this notion that the dark side is more powerful. But I think if we're thinking about the Force holistically, and how the goal the entire time is to keep it in balance, it's the fact that they are both so powerful in and of themselves, and neither one is more powerful inherently, right? And so when he makes that distinction, it's the easier one, it's more seductive. That's something I really, really appreciate. And of course, my favorite moment from his training is when he lifts the X-wing. Well, before he lifts the X-wing, he tells Luke, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. And that was the first time in my life where I completely exited myself. I'm like, yo, I am so much more than this. Like I was completely feeling myself. I was thinking so much of myself. Like, yes, I am a bright and shining star. This body is just a vessel, and I am so much more than it. And then his final lesson to Luke when he lifts the X-wing and he's like, I don't believe it. And he's like, and that is why you fail. And yeah, that is the icing on the cake for me in that act.
Always with you, what cannot be done.
Mhm.
Yeah, just so many. Love it. Matt, what jumps out at you?
So I actually got to see this back a couple months ago. It came back in theaters. I never thought I'd get to see it again, like in theaters. But something I just noticed, and I mean, I appreciated it, but I never appreciated it so much, was just the score in the entire film. But like from the moment the asteroid chase starts, just the score, it knows when to like build up, it knows when to cut out, it knows when to, and it's not like manipulative, but it's perfect for each individual scene. And I think especially like on Dagobah, it knows when to be completely quiet and just let you hear like the crickets and the snakes. It knows when to build up, like when he's raising it out of the water. And I'm a musician, so I can really appreciate just all the work they put into just the score in the film, and how it just really affects and builds on that, especially in the second act, with those scenes from the asteroid chase all the way to Bespin. It's just great. But also, like you guys have been talking about Yoda, but I didn't take him seriously at first. I mean, I guess no one did when he started beating on R2D2, but like I was like, this is the guy. This is like the Grandmaster. And I guess Luke was feeling that way too. But there was like a moment where he's not taking any of the crap. And you see Yoda, like the puppet, he's kind of smiling and he just like frowns. And like Yoda goes in like serious mode. And I was like, okay, this is the guy. But really just, it made me want to like, I mean, there was like a couple throwaway lines in A New Hope, like mentioning the Clone Wars, but seeing Yoda and knowing that there were like more Jedi and that they used to be a thing really wanted me to know like what happened before, what happened after, and it got me interested in the stuff like outside of the films. But just learning about Yoda, learning about the Jedi Order and what came before, just really got me interested in what happened before, and of course that was rewarded, years later with the prequel trilogy. But
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the asteroid belt theme is my favorite theme of all of Star Wars. I love it
I'll listen
so
to it on my
much.
way home today.
It's such a like I've never heard anything like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it goes back into the Imperial March, and then the dun, 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 and like it's so good. That whole scene just I love it. I also, things that jump out to me, without trying to tread on the same things you guys have already covered, because you did an amazing job. But um, that bounty hunters meeting was one of those things, kind of like the Clone Wars line in the first one, where you're like, okay, who are these guys? I know disintegrations, so that's been a problem in the past. Like it's been enough of a problem that you have to preface this. um, like that's interesting too. I mean, it's Boba Fett was created for the holiday special, and um and just his character kept growing, and we still are seeing the ramifications of it today, which is just really cool. uh and additionally, I mean, I still have to go. Um oh this being inside of the cave and realizing that it's not a cave. um I love it. And I also love Anthony Daniels, like, low comedy bits. Yeah, he was obnoxious on the ship, but it adds to the chaos of, like, all right, we're being chased. The Star Destroyers are behind us. We're in an asteroid field, and this guy's rattling off numbers. Like, what the heck? And then when Han and Leia have their moment, and he walks in and he's like, "Hello," it's like, read the room, man. Like,
Yeah.
it just makes me laugh.
He does read the room, and that's what he gets out of it. There's two people here. Hello.
uh, yeah, but yeah, I still always have to go back to Luke learning on Dagobah. That moment you guys are talking about, where he's playing the buffoon, and even says, "Oh, your father, yeah, I knew him, powerful warrior," and all this stuff. And it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, and he's getting impatient, and then Yoda just drops it. It's like, yeah, he's impatient. I can't train this kid. Like, this kid's an idiot. um and to me, that resonates today, because it wasn't that he was an idiot. And it goes back to, you luminous beings, are we not this crude matter? Luke was just judging him because he was little. You know what I mean? Like, Luke had this thing in his head of, this is what it means to be powerful. This is what a warrior is. This is what I need to be. And confirmation bias. If it's not that, I ignore it. And that's a lesson that I think is true for everyone. You sometimes you're shocked at what you meet when you actually stop and listen, and to people. Um and yeah, just that, unable to pay attention. Oh, the dark side cave, I did want to touch on that, because when I was little, I had no idea what the hell was happening. It
Same.
took me years. Like, I was like, okay, this is a slow, weird part, but we'll get back to the good stuff. Like, it was cool when he defeated the dark side, but then you see his own face, and you're still putting these pieces, and these pieces aren't going to show you a picture. It's putting together a puzzle without looking at the box beforehand. And you have all these pieces, and they're like forming this thing, and the way it coalesces later in the film is incredible. What's in there? Only what you take with you. you know it's
Your weapons
whew, we can go off on
will
that one
not need them.
forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, Luke gets impatient, right? He has the visions of his friends in trouble, and they're like, if you go now, you're going to die. And he's like, I don't care. So Luke runs off, and we get to Act 3. So we get Luke heads to Cloud City, and throughout the rest of the film. And we'll go to Element first.
So of course he had to prove me right when he completely acted on his emotions and was being as impatient as Yoda was telling Obi-Wan he was, and went off to save his friends. And of course that ended well. Um, but primarily because he lost a hand and he didn't really do much. Like he ended up needing to be saved himself. But I guess the moment that stands out to me in this act is, of course, the big twist back in the day, which is now just like the crux of this entire movie, is finding out who Vader was to Luke. But I guess a little before that moment, it was the duel itself had so many implications emotionally and practically, because it had shown that Luke, while he did do some training with Yoda, and he had shown vast amounts of improvement in his skills, he still was being toyed with by Vader. And you can see it in the fight. Like he's doing lots of flourishes, he's doing lots of spins, and Vader's just like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you do not need to do all this stuff. And he's just bearing down on Luke the whole time. He bears down on him until that antenna post out on that shaft, and then he takes off his hand. And the additional implication of this scene is when, obviously, even beyond revealing who he was to Luke, is him revealing that he actually wants Luke to join him, and maybe imply he wants to overthrow the Emperor as well. And of course, our first look at perhaps a dwindling or a flickering candlelight of Anakin, where was it in this movie or was it in Return when he said, you don't know the power of the dark side?
He says it in this one.
He says, if you only knew the power of the dark side.
Yeah.
In this one.
So I think, having seen it multiple times now, not in the first time, but multiple viewings, you're kind of like, I don't know, is this Anakin warning him? He's like, you don't know, dude. Like, I have to obey my master. And we'll touch on this like obviously in later on in the episode about like knowing what we know now with what happened. But yeah, those are the moments that stand out to me in this act.
Yeah. And then also the reveal of, we would be honored if you would join us. Oh man, that still gives me chills. Like that moment to me is I mean, it's still ahead, but it also, the only other time I had that feel is in Spider-Man Homecoming, when he opens the door and to his date, and it's and he knows it's the Vulture, and he's like, oh shoot. Yeah. Matt, your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So I just love the introduction of Lando. And I think he's like the perfect like juxtaposition to Han Solo. Han Solo is this gritty, like they both come from the same like cast, but like Han Solo is this gritty, kind of no nonsense guy, and Lando is this very flamboyant, suave kind of, they really work well together. And it's just a good balance. And then just to see Han Solo after, confronting that and just becoming super vulnerable, I think for the first time we get to see him just kind of knock down a peg when he gets captured, and just definitely a different side of Han Solo, seeing him get tortured and thrown back in there, and when Leia's like tending to him, like that's not the Han Solo we knew, but like he is really just a guy, and he has multiple layers. And then with, as far as Lando goes, usually in films, after a guy like that's kind of a friend but then betrays, usually becomes like a minor antagonist, and he dies, or that's the end of it. You never see that kind of character come back in the next film as like a main character. So I like seeing that, and just his involvement, and that, like, he messed up on, but he was able to be redeemed, and just to have him still work for them, and help them out. I just really appreciate the time they put into making Lando not just another Han Solo, not just another Luke Skywalker, but like his own thing.
Yeah, like the other half of the same coin, like the other side of the same coin. And I do love, because he's he was playing the hand that he was dealt in the best way possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Victoria?
This is one of, I said last act is my favorite, but this act is my favorite because I love the duel on Bespin. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in all of cinematic history. It's just beautiful. It's got so much interesting symbolism. I mean, yeah, exactly. So it's one of my favorite scenes in all of film. Like Element was saying, like you see Vader toying with him. You see this sort of like layer to, he doesn't want to defeat him in a way. He wants it to just like, he's just playing Luke. But backtracking a little, so the entrant that you know, you were talking about, we would be honored if you would join us. My favorite dramatic entrance by Darth Vader is "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." And we see the lights swell, and then we see his silhouette. So I used to have this memorized, so forgive me. You know, I have a law exam this week, so my mind is a little convoluted, but the first words that introduced Darth Vader to the public were a 7-foot tall Dark Lord of the Sith, flowing black robes, something about he came in on the wind, just something about how he's conjured in an otherworldly kind of sense. And I feel like this really is the precipice of his character. Like he's otherworldly. He just shows up. He's conjured. But okay, the duel on Bespin, back to that. So the idea, you see this entire duel happen, and then right when we feel as an audience something is about to change because of the visual cue we get with there being a bridge. So they're moving left to right, which is symbolic of progress, of change. Something is going to happen. I mean, so even just subconsciously, us as an audience member, like our hearts are, you know, rising in our throats. And spoiler alert for Return of the Jedi, it's the exact opposite. We see them moving right to left. So it's a regression in Luke's identity and, you know, Vader's identity. So we see them moving left to right. Something is about to change. The bridge, you know, representing like these things are about to connect. And we saw visual cues making it happen for us this whole time. You know, like in Act 1, we see Luke in the back to tank. In Act 2, we see Luke's face in Vader's helmet. And then now we see the bridge and the "I am your father" scene. And that doesn't just change Luke's identity, it changes Darth Vader's identity. And, you know, we see, like Element was saying, this shred of somebody else that existed, because it's not Darth Vader that is his father, it was Anakin Skywalker. And so it's an interesting view of that, the dichotomy of that, the overlap in those. We see Darth Vader say, "Come with me, it is the only way." And to me, it shows how different Luke is from him in that it is the only way. And Luke says, "No, it's not. Like it isn't. I don't have to do these things." And I don't know, it's just a really beautiful moment. I was reading about how Mark Hamill didn't like how in one of the special editions, they added a scream when Luke fell. And they since took it out. But it's a moment of calm. It's a moment of calm, and he lets go. And that's something that Anakin could not do. You know, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, you know, what we know now, but Anakin could not let go, but Luke did. Luke let go. And so even symbolically, you know, literally, there's just so much in that duel that is just so beautiful. In this act, we also see Leia's connection to the Force. And I'm getting chilled just thinking about it, because, you know, watching this as a female has, you know, there's a legacy of the Force that was inherently male. And we see Leia as a part of it in this point. We don't understand it yet, but we see Luke, like she registers that connection. She knows where he is, and it's unexplainable. And then, you know, on lighter notes, the banter during the duel, the all too easy. I love it. Just all of those things. I'm trying to look at my note, but the energy I want in my everyday life is alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival. Like if I could have that kind of energy, you know, that's what we're hoping for. We see at the end of this, you know, the final shot is them looking out, wanting more. It's we don't get a happy ending. We're left with questions. We're left wanting. We're left with puzzle pieces that we have to put together. And so it's a very beautiful anticipation at the end of this, because it is that first step into the larger world that Star Wars is so, beautifully good at doing. Like, we always want more. And I think it was just a lovely end to our second Star Wars. Oh, and I was going to say that Empire Strikes Back was a very interesting experience for me, because some of you have heard this story, but as a kid, so I was introduced to Star Wars with A New Hope first, and then Revenge of the Sith was coming out in theaters that year. And so then my parents were like, oh, like, let's just watch 1, 2, and then we'll go watch 3. And so I watched A New Hope. I knew who Darth Vader was. I knew who Luke was. I knew these characters I had seen. I was like, Obi-Wan, that's interesting. When I saw 1 and 2, and I go to the theaters, Revenge of the Sith, 9 years old. I was ready. I wasn't ready, because I had 2 different relationships. I had, Darth Vader, and I had Anakin Skywalker, and then they converge, and I just couldn't handle it. And so I watch Empire Strikes Back with the lens of knowing, like, I was still fresh that like love was his downfall. Like, his capacity for deep love, whether it was warped or not, that's what did it. And I guess, like, I watched Empire Strikes Back with that lens, and so it already had this. While I knew that Anakin and Luke were related, I still got a different feeling when I watched Empire Strikes Back for the first time because of that lens.
Yeah, that's it's awesome. I mean, I that's one of my favorite things, finding out how people got into Star Wars for that reason, because depending on what you started with, you have a whole different view. You have different ideas of who the main characters are. You have it's an entirely different message, which is just really cool to me.
I do want to add to what Victoria said about it's a darker film. I think that Empire was kind of like Empire. What it did for Star Wars, it kind of made everyone feel claustrophobic. Like, you kind of go from the Battle of Hoth, where it's this sprawling landscape of snow, then you go to Dagobah, where everything's kind of there's foliage, and just everything is just very claustrophobic, including Yoda's hut. And then you go to Bespin, where all the hallways are claustrophobic. The Bespin duel is just very claustrophobic. I'm saying claustrophobic so much.
That you're like,
I just want to create that parallel between, like, it's a darker film, because like the world, even like the world building and the lore was scaled up 100-fold, as I mentioned. The movie itself puts the audience into like this kind of small space that you can't breathe, and the way it ends on a dark note is a testament to that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, as the other side of what Victoria was saying earlier, because you were talking about Luke's journey, where we see him in the Bacta, and then going forward, and then we look at Vader is on the other side of that. Is we see him as this powerful individual, killing people, doing whatever he wants. Then we get a glimpse of his humanity, right? We see his head briefly, and then we meet the Emperor, and we find out he's not the top dog. He doesn't have full control on everything. And so for the character of Vader, again, he's this otherworldly being, but at the start, and then at the end, it's just the two of them, father, son, like, and that's the most human thing that we ever got to see of him.
I mean, his voice shakes. Like, when he's talking to Luke, he pauses before he says son. And I don't know, there's just something beautiful about that. You're so right. Oh, making me cry.
It's like one of those inner dialogues. Should I call him dad? Should I call him son? they were both kind of like having that moment in their head.
That's a great point. Like, Luke literally comes out of sleep or coma or whatever, and is like, father. He didn't call him father. It's a moment of acceptance, a moment of like, I know this person. And so were we getting glimmers of who Anakin Skywalker was at that moment? I think so, because Luke recognized him, I guess, in my mind.
No, that's an interesting thought. I really like it. And then I wanted to touch on a couple things of the Bespin duel. One being the lack of music for the majority of it, just being eerie, and then again the same concept that we've been talking about, where it's this open platform that they're fighting on. Also, the colors with the red and blue lightsaber, and then it's a blue background with the red highlights in the floor. It's just really incredible. But it really felt like at the beginning he was expecting to be able to complete his mission of just capturing this kid, bringing him to the Emperor. He knocks him into the thing to freeze him, and it's like, okay, I guess he's not really up to par. And then Luke escapes, and he's like, ooh, possibilities. But again, we go from that wide open platform into the smaller room, where Vader puts two hands on it, and that's when the music starts, because that's when we're getting good. He blows them out, and then they're on the bridge, and then he's on the thing, and then hang on, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and I don't know, it gives me chills because of that same claustrophobic feeling that you're talking about. And then his serene acceptance of, well, then deuces, man. Like,
Yeah.
I love it. But so I gotta ask you guys, what do you think this would have been like to see it back then when it came out in 1980? And we'll keep it with that. And also, because I know, Victoria, you were looking up some of the reviews on it and comments from that time period. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, so hopefully you can give us some insight with those. But we will. Last one started with Pep. So Matt.
So my dad did actually go see it in theaters, so he's kind of recounted the tale a little bit, which is super exciting to hear. But I do remember him saying that he said people just kept going back and back to it, like watching it 3 or 4 times, and no one ever did that with movies back then, he said. But the critics just hated it. But he said he remembers just seeing like all the special effects he thought were real. Like he didn't think there were any puppets. Like he was like, these are real things. Like I don't know how they comprehended it, but like just because we can't even imagine that now because we've seen CGI and all that stuff. But it's just interesting to see them see the walkers and think like, did they really build those things? Like, are those really walking like in there? And so it's just very interesting to see like what people like didn't know about effects and stuff. So I definitely think a lot of people went in and were just blown away by the practical effects, because that was definitely ahead of its time.
Yeah, I mean, they invented the stuff. It's like it's special effect engineering, where it's not even that it didn't exist. The tools to create this didn't exist, and there's so many layers to it. But yeah, Victoria, if you could see it in 1980.
So I would just die. I saw it its like 40th anniversary release, and I was crying, I was laughing. It was a beautiful communal experience, and I recounted this to some friends. It's like you saw people bringing their kids or their grandkids and their loved ones and sharing Star Wars, because in a way Star Wars is a heritage, and we've inherited it, we've bequeathed it to others, and it's this beautiful connective thing. But seeing it in for the first time, before all these spoilers for internet and things of that nature, would be just absolutely mind-boggling. Like was mentioned before, now it's one of the most beloved movies of all time. But at the time, it did get mixed reviews. And I was researching that recently. It's like someone was talking about how it's overrated, it was derivative, made no narrative sense. They said that it was a soap opera instead of a space opera. Just it was too dark. that it was more concerned with money making and franchise building, that it just departed. Oh, this was my favorite. Someone wrote that it trashed on all of the work that, the original Star Wars had done, later named A New Hope, but it trashed the legacy of Star Wars. And I mean, we can't imagine that now. It's like we can't imagine somebody saying that about Empire Strikes Back. But is it time? Is it the world we've fallen in love with, that this is the entry point in a way? And like I mentioned earlier, like it's called the heart of Star Wars because it is emotionally driven. All of our action is, not all of it, but a grand majority of our action is emotional action, character action. And that did get mixed reviews. Like the director, I read an interview with him recently, and he was talking about how now it's great that it's well received, but at the time it did get mixed response. I wrote something else on this recently, but seeing it for the first time in 1980 would be wonderful and beautiful. But I don't know. It's interesting having the world we've fallen in love with, and this being the cornerstone of it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Pep.
I would have loved to have seen it in 1980. Obviously, the biggest thing that comes to mind is that there would have been a bigger shock factor for me. Because truth be told, before I had seen this film, I had already heard the phrase "Luke, I am your father," even though that's the incorrect quote. I had heard it before, like so many times, of course, in Vader's voice. So I was kind of spoiled to a degree, and like I didn't know the context around it, but it certainly would have been great to experience that live, that revelation, that twist live, and kind of share in the experience. So, I mean, that's probably all I'll have to say about this. I would have loved to have that experience because I was watching things on VHS. Everyone had already seen these things, and they were just "Luke, I am your father" in their fans doing that, practical effect. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like trying to put two and two together. And then, obviously when I found out that it was Vader's voice, I was like, no. And then I had watched the movie and I was like, okay, fine. So I didn't have so much of that twist wasn't so much as impactful as it would have been had I seen it with everyone else in the theater.
Yeah.
I'm interested about the people that thought he was lying, and how that was not necessarily immediately accepted as truth. Like he was manipulating Luke. I think that would be an interesting lens to see all of it through.
Yeah. George Lucas actually asked psychologists before making this be the twist, because he didn't know whether or not children would be able to take it.
That's why Yoda is in Return of the Jedi, is because they talked to a child psychologist and they needed Yoda to say it very clearly. So that's why Yoda is in Return of the Jedi.
That's cool. I didn't know that part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would have loved to see it there. Then I have no doubt that I would have absolutely loved it. But the thing I wish I had, and it's gonna sound weird, but I just imagine the kind of cold, empty feeling you would get walking out of the theater from that, of like, okay, so is he actually his dad? And what does that mean for Obi-Wan and Yoda, who were lying to him, telling him to kill this guy this whole time? Like, that's kind of sus. And like there's all these, he doesn't have a hand. Han Solo is in carbonite. Yeah, it would just leave you with this kind of weird, open, kind of cold feeling, kind of like, I mean, it's how I felt when I saw Infinity War the first time, because of how it ends, and you're just like, so we actually watched Infinity War on December 31st, and we timed it so that Thanos' snap would be at midnight. And it's a terrible way to ring in the new year because you're just sad.
Wait, did you do this year?
Yes.
Oh.
We blame you.
Mm.
All of this, we blame you.
You should
Uh-oh.
feel a little bit more remorse. He's just laughing at us.
I know, he's laughing. Come on.
But
I'd also imagine, like, back then, you don't have social media or internet, right? And you can't hop on your phone and start talking to people. Oh, is this real? Is this real? What do you think? Like, what's your theory? Instead, you're kind of you exit the theater and you just kind of like look down at the floor, downtrodden, and you're just like,
Whoa.
what's going on with life?
and
Am
there's
I
no
real?
way, like, you don't get to go on YouTube and find someone recorded the clip of that scene so you can see it again. Like, you know what I mean? You have to go to a movie and see the whole movie again to catch that part again. Oh man, it's just really, really interesting. Well, now I gotta ask. So we have all nine episodes, plus we have Clone Wars and Rebels, and we have everything. I'm curious how that affects your view of this movie and how this movie affects your view of these other things. You know what I mean? Because it's all intertwined. And for this one, I will start with Matt.
Oh, so I mean, one of the things I always look at the duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and look at the duel between Darth Vader and Luke, and even just any of Anakin's clashes. And one thing I always was weird to me, I always wondered if like Darth Vader cutting Luke's hand off was on purpose or not, because Darth Vader lost a hand back in his day, and I think losing it to Dooku was one of the first things that started his downfall to the dark side. And so I was always curious whether that like was intentional and like that was meant to be like Darth Vader was cutting it off to try to get Luke to start spiraling into that. But just really any of the context that is added with Anakin just adds like, you know, 1,000 layers to what Darth Vader is going through in all those scenes. So that's probably my biggest one. Oh, and a little small one, getting a lot of stuff about some of the side characters. Again, like we get some stuff with Wedge and even like Hobby and some of those other like pilots and stuff and Rebels and stuff like that. You know, getting to see that expanded like, you know, so many years later, and then going back to the movie and seeing these little background characters that now have like, you know, full stories laid out in front of them is pretty nice to see too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Victoria?
So I want to go to the 2015 Darth Vader comics. We see him rise from his vulnerability in A New Hope, and then we get the Silo arc. So we see him say, like, in a way, these are your children, these cybernetic creations, this new threshold into a new future separate from the Force. So we see this idea of legacy, of you know, parentage, of that threshold into something different. You know, we get introduced to Carbon, the nightmare fuel that is Commander Carbon. We have Toulon Voidgazer, one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time. I love her. But we see, you know, this idea of, you know, father and next generation type thing. And then immediately following, or in the midst of that arc, we see Boba Fett come to Darth Vader and say the identity of the Death Star pilot is Skywalker. And so we get this shift. And I don't know, it really enhances Empire Strikes Back to me because of that. We see this idea of legacy, and we see this idea of like build, deconstruct immediately. And I love the idea of like he always wants to choose. Control is one of the main things in Darth Vader Anakin arc. And he wants this control of who is his child. Like, it is not these cybernetic enhancements that are meant to replace him. It is his child and like his own flesh and blood. And it reminds him he's flesh and blood. Not a robot, not, you know, separated from humanity. We see the introduction of humanity in that comic, and it leads us into Empire Strikes Back. And then don't get me started on the 2020 after Empire Strikes Back. I can't talk about that one without crying.
Which is fair.
I can't include any of those panels without watching, you know, over my shoulder.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to comment and be like, "Why? How dare you?" Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I want to say one more thing. I'm so sorry. I'm the worst. But okay, after reading Bloodline, I know I've been talking a lot about the like Anakin Luke relationship, but after reading Bloodline and just the direction of the when Han's about to be put into carbonite, we see Leia in like that one shot of her face looking at Darth Vader, and we see that, you know, like every life drains out of her. We've seen this woman has watched her planet be destroyed. She's been tortured, and the moment she sees this happen, and then she looks at him, that moment, just after reading Bloodline, after knowing what I know now, it changes it every single time. I like it, it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah, absolutely. They father daughter didn't have a great meeting.
No, absolutely
for
not.
sure. Element.
I guess, you know, just to build on what everyone has said, overall context to every situation, more character perspectives from Rebels, Lost Stars, even Rogue One when we see Vader on the profundity instead of the Tuna 4.
You got it.
You see just how powerful he is, you know, and granted, we had assumed this much when we first saw the OT, but you know, after seeing everything from the prequels, how powerful Anakin was, and how praised he was as a duelist, you know, by Yoda and Plo Koon and all of his constituents in the Jedi Order, you know, his character more, so you can see more of the nuances in his dialogue as Vader, and you can pick apart moments where he's like, "Oh, I think that's a little bit more Anakin than Vader." And so, with more context, you can draw a lot more parallels between Luke's impatience and his aptitude for the dark side, and Anakin's. So, you know, everything that we know now with all of the shows, all of the books, it just kind of like it makes it so much more robust, because before then, even as large as Empire was of a movie in terms of lore and scope and just world, and social connection between, or familial connection between Luke and Vader, knowing all 9 movies changes so much about just all of the dialogue we know and love. And I guess since I name dropped Lost Stars, when you watch Battle of Hoth again and you see all the pilots, you know, boarding their T-47s, and you're just like, one of them's Thane. And I guess it's awesome that I get to see him as part of the fight now, as in before when I hadn't read Lost Stars. I only really cared about Luke and Wedge, and so like, yeah, just having more characters in the background, especially to see in those moments.
Yeah, it adds so much depth to be like, you know, especially them having to go sabotage the hyperdrive of the Millennium Falcon, and it's so cool.
Oh, when Luke does his tow cable maneuver thing, you're like, Thane's watching that.
Yeah. And so for me, it's just kind of like you said, but of adding just this depth. And my mind goes directly to Rebels, because we got a lot of forced lore in Rebels, and we just kind of gave us a lot of insight into just the spiritual nature of it, and it amplifies that scene so much. And I mean, the whole part with, you know, Luke training with Yoda, and then additionally, um, all the scenes with them together gets echoed again in The Last Jedi beautifully, and it's um yeah, it's just powerful, you know what I mean? All together, it just makes the whole thing powerful, and it shows you how much love goes into crafting these things and these worlds, and just makes you want to be part of it. But yeah, why don't we go ahead and we'll go around, and thank you everyone for joining me. And you know, this is awesome. It's my favorite Star Wars movie, and my favorite Star Wars people to talk with. So I'm stoked. Let's go around and do, you know, I know we do have some in the comics and stuff already, but what story would you want as either a lead in or a follow up to this movie? And then we'll end it with just sharing us if you have any closing thoughts and again where we can find you. Um, we'll start with Victoria this time.
So, okay, I know everybody's like, oh, we've heard enough about Darth Vader. And
No.
we haven't. We haven't. So I would love the 2015 comics to get some sort of screen treatment. That would be amazing. Especially like I was saying, the Silo arc. It's so intriguing. And there's a lot of like traditional sci-fi elements in those cybernetic squad. And so I think that's really interesting. There's a lot of new things in the 2015 comics that like the Shoot to Run War would be really cool to see. Just to see like the scope of the Empire and how they maintained this control.
Chloe Bennett
So,
for Dr. Afra.
oh my gosh, yes, we need Dr. Afra. We need her on screen. I want 000 on screen. I need it. I need it. But honestly, yeah, anything and everything Star Wars content I will consume. So anything around this era would be great. Maybe another like Lost Stars kind of book following Return of the Jedi would be really neat. I'm sorry, I would just watch and read anything, so I'm not a good person to start with. But any final thoughts about Empire Strikes Back? I think there's just such a beauty to it that we've all fallen in love with. It shows us what it challenges us. Like Empire Strikes Back is a challenge, and I think a lot of us and us here at least we enjoy when Star Wars challenges us. And so there's always something to love about Star Wars, but I think this is like the cornerstone of Star Wars can challenge you. And so this is kind of where we trace all of that back to as an active audience. And where to find me, it's Victoria Y'all on TikTok. So yeah, thank y'all so much for having me. I always love chatting with you guys. It makes my month, week, year. So thank you for having me.
It's the best every time you come on. And Element?
I guess I'll piggyback off of what Victoria has said with the comics. There's a lot of comics that we have for before Empire and after Empire that I would love to see on screen in some way, shape, or form, like an anthology TV show where we get to see, hopefully, we get to see Luke training with Verla to learn Force Choke. And before then, we get to see Luke maybe just, consulting with Force Ghost Obi-Wan to learn how to do the Force Pull. There's a lot of there's 3 years in between, or 3 years before Empire and a year after Empire, that there's just a lot of stories that can be told. And I'll let Victoria drool over the Darth Vader side of things, and I'll want the Luke Skywalker and possibly more Yoda as well. Maybe we can do the Age of Resistance comic too, showing Yoda just coming to terms with having failed and just his time on Dagobah. It could be the show called Dagobah. It's so simple, but it's it is what it is.
Dagobah Days. I've already titled it.
Days. Are there days on Dagobah?
I don't know.
Yeah. Final thoughts on Empire. Anytime someone has any doubts as to whether or not they're gonna like Star Wars, you just tell them to go back to the beginning. Like the Empire Strikes Back is, as Dagobah is a nexus, Empire Strikes Back is a nexus for Star Wars. And like you go back here to really, really try to find yourself again. If you're, I don't know who would be that wobbly nowadays. But if you ever find yourself wibbly wobbly about Star Wars, just go back to this movie and you'll fall right back in love with it. And of course, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Element7.
Yep.
Thanks for
And
having me, dude.
oh, always. And also, if anyone listening does not know, there is this amazing thing called Echoes of the Past. If you go to Element7's YouTube channel, it is fully voice acted and written beautifully. Um,
Soon to be co-written by you.
I absolutely love it. And Matt?
Yeah, so hear me out. Okay, so I do have an idea of one comic or book that I really want from this. And in back when we had Legends, we had Hobby and General Veers both survived, and now in canon they're considered dead right now. But they spent so much time in Rebels on Hobby's story, and I would really love to see. I love the relationship of Callus and Zeb. And I would love to see, like, if Veers and Hobby survived and they're stuck on Hoth, I would love to see them, maybe, one of them's crippled and they have to like survive on Hoth and build this relationship and learn about the Empire, learn why Veers is part of the Empire, learn why Hobby, left the Empire, just see like that and get that built up, and then just have them survive, because they have like backstories and stuff. I would really enjoy, probably more than anything, just seeing something like that. Just those two kind of background characters, just chilling literally on Hoth.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and yeah, final thoughts. Again, and I think like Victoria said, it's a very, Star Wars is a very personal thing. It's a very, you go with groups, make sure to watch it with someone. I have a lot of memories. Again, me and my dad just sitting in here, popping a thing of popcorn, getting some root beer, sitting down and watching Empire. And then going to see it in theaters. I got to take my fiance. So, we've gotten, every time I see it, it's always like something memorable and someone you can go and experience it with. So I just, those personal ties are what makes it just a little bit more special, when you're watching it. So you can find me again on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram. I actually do have a website, thatstarwarsauthor.com, where I post some stuff, some short stories and some other profiles and stuff like that. So yeah, I appreciate it. I'm still really nervous because, again, you guys are like my idols. But it's awesome to be able to come last minute. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you came. Element is who I was following. Element and Comb, who I had on recently, and it's cool because the whole community, it's a big family, and
just feed off each other.
Yeah, and even though we do get a bad rap because there is toxicity in our community, the good parts of this community are better than any other community I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Like bar none. For me, if I could have either a lead up or an after story, I actually had a really good one in mind, and it just slipped out of it while I was talking. So that's a shame. But the whole plot of the beginning of Return of the Jedi seemed ill-conceived. The rescue attempt,
contrived almost.
Like there was a lot of variables that had to be, I'm happy it worked out, obviously. But I think we could have a story of them trying to figure out where do they take Han? Okay, who has him? How can we get back? How can we get him back? What do we need? And it would be like, how they get the information. It'd be like a mini heist, film. And then also, I want a bounty hunter's tale from those people at that meeting. Like, where did they come from to there? You know what I mean? Like, how did they get? Did Darth Vader like get his card, business card or whatever, or where did they go after that? You know what I mean? Like, it was a cool group of bounty hunters, and I'm sure there's some excellent stories that could be told off of that. Also, Honda Onaka is somewhere in the galaxy, and I want to know what he's up to. That's just a side note, but
he's just relaxing.
Yeah. But again, thank you guys so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Um, this day always makes my week better, and so I appreciate you guys for helping lift my spirit. But yeah, thank you for joining me, and may the force be with you always.
May the force be with you.
The force be with
Yeah.
you.
Force be with you.